Loyalty and enthusiasm are going to be missing, and cooperation are going to be weak there in house that lacks loyalty. In fact, loyalty is one in all the extremely necessary components contributive to success by its presence or injuring business by its absence. It's straightforward for the chief to understand the worth of loyalty to himself and loyalty to his house. However, it's generally troublesome for the minor worker to grasp the total that means of this quality. Several workers, sadly, believe that loyalty to self and loyalty to the house don't seem to be solely distinct, however opposing components. These folks imagine that loyalty to self is getting the most effective pay and therefore the best conditions for themselves. They think, and justly, too, in several instances, that the home is hostile paying any longer than it's to, which it's not fascinated by making conditions straightforward for its employees. As a matter of reality, loyalty to self and loyalty to the house ought to go hand in hand, benefiting each the employee and therefore the institution that employs him. The corporate that complains owing to lack of loyalty on the part of its workers ought to investigate fastidiously to be told if it's basing its ways upon this fact. The loyalty of associate worker during a nice majority of cases could be a responsive quality to unfinished upon the loyalty of the leader to him. To inspire loyalty in workers, the employer shouldn't solely treat fairly those operating for him, however ought to produce within them associate interest in their work and in the welfare of the establishment. It's extremely fascinating to examine that each man is given work that he likes, alternatively is instructed to love his work. He can then naturally take associate interest in it. This interest will from time to time be stimulated in varied ways in which one methodology that's meeting successfully in several establishments is that the giving of talks. Another is through the distribution of literature. A well-liked methodology is subsidization prizes for action. A superb manner in each business is tantalizing the staff to form suggestions, so giving due recognition to the suggestions created. The leader ought to create it clear that the establishment is fascinated by its workers and wants them to be happy and glad and prepared for larger opportunities. Business shouldn't be the sole thought each time associate leader meets associate worker, as a result of that is unhealthy business. The human facet of each employee ought to be some recognition, some attention. Once the normal worker is aware of that the establishment that he's employed takes associate interest in his well-being, he are going to be a loyal worker, and within the establishment or out of it, a loyal worker could be a splendid advertisement and a positive force. During a good-sized manufactory, an occurrence occurred that incontestable to associate leader the worth of loyalty. It had been necessary for him to go away his company for 6 months to regain his health, and therefore the business was turned over to the young secretary of the organization. Once the leader came back when *FR1 years sojourn abroad, he was loth to raise what progress had been created throughout his absence. He knew that the manufacturing plant had been with efficiency run underneath his direction, which the dividends of the past few years had been gratifying. To his surprise, however, he learned that the output throughout the 6 months he was away exceeded that of any similar amount within the history of the company. He asked his secretary to account for the weird showing. The latter evaded the question initially, however finally, in response to demand, told the following story: "For your time I actually have detected that, whereas our workers are doing with efficiency the work appointed to them, they need ne'er shown a disposition to induce into the spirit of things and work with interest and loyalty." I won the boldness of one of the leaders, knowing he mirrored the opinion of the opposite men, and at last I learned the reason why work had been happening here during a spiritless fashion. I am going to place the rationale in his own words. The boss takes no inter-Eastern Standard Time in our welfare. Why ought we tend to take it in his? He pays North American nation for what we tend to do, and that we do what he pays for. If he thinks we're no higher than machines, why ought we tend to act toward him any higher than the machines do? On the opposite hand, if he treated North American nation like humans, and place a bit friendliness into that expression that is forever suspicious, and if he'd provide North American nation an opportunity to mention what we tend to thought, then once there is work to be read, we'd hurry it, and once there is additional work we'd twig done. I thanked him, and the week after you left I called a meeting of all the men. I told them what a big responsibility was on my shoulders and that I wanted them to help me to make good. I asked every man who had a suggestion that could interest the institution to come to my office and discuss it with me, and I concluded by saying, "Boys, while I'm in control here, I'm going to be loyal to you. Will you be loyal to me?" There was a shout of yes, representing more enthusiasm than I had ever seen demonstrated in the plant. We've had 5 meetings since then, one each month, and several of the boys in the plant have participated. Well, when the big Corwin order came along, 10 weeks ago, it didn't seem possible to get it through in time. I appealed to the boys. They reassured me, and you know the result. That's all there is to it. It's just a little loyalty. A little loyalty, repeated the employer after a long pause, appears to be a force to be reckoned with. I haven't meant to be disloyal to the men. In fact, I've never given the question of loyalty any thought. But now that I think it over, the men were right. I've been exchanging pay for work. From now on it's going to be pay with loyalty for work with loyalty. Many companies have tried with success the plan of giving to their employees printed slips containing little sermons. Where the sermons were diplomatic and interesting, as well as instructive, they have never failed to accomplish good results. In those cases where the printed matter has been only instructive, driving its lesson in a dictatorial or didactic manner, the employees have generally resented instead of respected the information designed to help them. In a series of little sermons there should be a reasonable proportion that deal with generalities and with subjects that have to do with the lives of employees outside of business hours. In fact, to many who receive the printed slips, words of suggestion that add to the pleasantness of life accomplish more in the way of stimulating loyalty than do direct educational essays. Numerous companies consider the pay envelope the best medium of distribution of printed advice, but that is a matter for each concern to settle for itself. Several little sermons are given here for the purpose of suggestion. Once a man with a grip rushed up to the station master, shouting, "Can I catch the 10:20 for Boston?" "Yes," came the reply, "if you run fast enough. It pulled out 2 minutes ago." The next train would leave 12 hours later. 2 minutes late wasn't much late. But it might as well have been 12 hours late as far as the train schedule was concerned. Punctuality has not only to do with catching trains. It has to do with your life's schedule. Promptness in keeping appointments, in reporting for duty, in performing one's work, is appreciated. Punctuality can be made a habit. Get the habit.